A cool, crisp breeze blows across the steps of the castle. Grieved footsteps are heard quickly moving across the tattered remains on the battlefield. The camera then pans to what remains of a dragon. Its wings begin fluttering and struggling to take flight, but the dragon ultimately remains unsuccessful. The footsteps that were heard from before suddenly grow closer. The camera then cuts to a shot from above, and the two dragon riders engage in combat. The heavier, larger fighter quickly gains the advantage and upper hand and slashes at the wrist of the other rider. The melee continues long enough for the survivors of the battle to close in and surround the two armor-clad dragon knights. After several blows, Aemon successfully removes his nephew's helm and shouts in his face while delivering a seemingly fatal blow. "How does it feel, bastard? How does it feel? My blade in your belly, howling blasted. You house-strong maggot." Lucerys' eyes then roll backwards and he collapses to the ground. The scene ends when a large shadow from above dwarfs the entire landscape, and it's revealed to be Rhaenyra arriving on Syrax, the massive she-dragon. In this video, I want to discuss some potential leaked information as well as dissect that leaked scene that was sent to me to the DMs over on Twitter. Speaking of which, make sure you go follow me at Sir_Hunts. Now, for those of you who are unaware and are new to my channel, take this information with a grain of salt, as it more or less may be a load of bullshit, but it serves its purpose and gives us entertainment throughout this long night. And as always, here's your say. Now, before we get started, please do me a massive favor and slap a like on this video, as the like goal is going to be 420. Wiz Khalifa laugh. Also, make sure you're subscribed, and this is the most important part. Make sure you have your notifications turned on, so that way you'll get an alert every single time I drop a video throughout this everyone's favorite long night. Now, jumping right into things, the leak scene that I mentioned at the beginning of this video was sent to me through someone that had somewhat confirmed around the same time that we would get a casting announced. Although they mentioned that it would be Prince Daemon, and they did not say that it would be Paddy Considine, who was confirmed to be King Viserys I, which ultimately, for the naysayers at least, confirmed that this series would be taking place during the Dance of the Dragons. But in that scene, I'm assuming, and it's not mentioned at first, but it's definitely what's supposed to be, according to the books. It's mentioned in several stories, and I always get comments about it, so I'll mention it again right here, and I'll link these down below in the description. If you want to be completely caught up and keep it simple, then just read Fire and Blood Part 1. You just read the entire book, and that way you'll have not only all of the information that this series is going to likely contain, but also some back information that I'm going to be making hundreds, if not thousands of videos on for the next 5 to 10 years, however long this series goes on for. But go ahead and read that, so you'll have all that information in one place. The rest of the stories, like the princess and the queen, and also the rogue prince or a king's brother, those books are sort of like mini novellas that are put in books with other stories, so it's kind of hard to track those down. So just to keep it short, read Fire and Blood, and I'll link that down below, or you can find it over on Amazon in the description. Now, just sort of dissecting the book history of the scene that I read out at the beginning of this video, telling it from the perspective of Lucerys Velaryon, who is one of Queen Rhaenyra's, eventually Queen Rhaenyra's children, but at the start of the show, she will be Princess of Dragonstone, which basically means one thing, that's next in line for the Iron Throne. That's when her father, Viserys, will still be alive. Now, what's interesting is that Paddy Considine is the death of his character, Viserys, is pretty much what starts this war, because as soon as he dies, the events that precede his death are what start the Dance of the Dragons, or the war, the most juiciest part of the show, what's going to be awesome. But what may be actually happening, because according to the events that happen in the books, is basically there's not much of a fight, and Aemon viciously and brutally murders Lucerys and takes him out, and then his body and his dragon are like washed up on shore a few days after the actual battle. Aemon survives with not more than a scratch on him, and he, plays a part in the war later to ultimately killed by his uncle Daemon, which sort of foreshadows this relationship before between, like the battle between Lucerys and Aemon being on the back of their dragons. It's an uncle-nephew relationship, of course that being Aemon One Eye being Lucerys' uncle. But to go a bit deeper, what this all sort of mirrors is an event in the books that happens when the boys are all younger. So it's it'll also be an interesting dynamic to see Rhaenyra and Alicent, because they're of a similar age. So you have King Viserys the First, played by Paddy Considine, who's going to have a daughter that's of a similar age to his wife, and the children that he has with his wife are sort of ignored and not next in line for the Iron Throne. Instead, it's going to his older daughter from a previous marriage, who's also of a similar age to his wife, but she's the one who's next in line for the Iron Throne. So that dynamic of both of their children sort of hating each other, because both of the women hate each other, is very much present. But an event that happens early on in Lucerys' life that involves his uncle Aemon is one time Aemon tries to mount Vhagar, who is a dragon that was used during Aegon's conquest, and Vhagar actually eventually becomes Aemon's dragon. But Vhagar was ridden initially by Visenya Targaryen, who was one of Aegon the Conqueror's sister wives during the initial Aegon's conquest, the event that everything along the story of this entire A Song of Ice and Fire is dated like it's usually AC, and that refers to, of course, Aegon's conquest. So all of the events in Westeros, or most of the events rather, are referred to as before or after Aegon's conquest. But getting back on track here, the main point of this is that when the boys are younger, Aemon attempts to mount Vhagar, and in doing this, Lucerys and his Valerian brothers, basically Rhaenyra's other children, they all have a bit of a scuffle. And in this scuffle, Lucerys has his nose broken, and in retaliation for this, he ends up taking out his dagger and slashing one of Aemon's eyes, this is infamously how Aemon becomes Aemon One Eye. He actually puts a sapphire in it, a blue sapphire, and I'm sure there's going to be multiple times during this show where, since the greens, which, if you're not aware, the blacks versus the greens are established at what's most likely going to be the beginning of this show. And actually, I've done a breakdown of another leaked scene. This is from a different source, but this person claims that the show is going to start with something called the Tourney of Splendor. And that's linked down below in the description if you want to watch a video on that information in depth. But the greens versus the blacks are established, and the greens are basically all of King Viserys' second wife, Queen Alicent, all of her children, and the opposing factions to the rightful heir to the Iron Throne are known as the Greens, when Queen Alicent of House Hightower wears the colors of her house, and Rhaenyra then wears, to this ceremony celebrating the 5th anniversary of King Viserys and Queen Alicent, but she wears the traditional colors of House Targaryen, which are the red and black. But since Aemon One Eye is going to be portrayed on the greens, and I'm sure they're going to be portrayed as the bad guys at first, and then of course they're going to be humanized in later episodes and later seasons, much like how the Lannisters are. And it's funny, there's going to be major callbacks in this series, because another one of their colors is golden. You're going to see a lot of parallels with Joffrey. Imagine Joffrey being a Targaryen, and you'll see parallels in not only Aemon One Eye, but his brother, who becomes king eventually as soon as his father dies, but King Aegon II. There will be several times, getting way back on track, there will be several times throughout this series where Aemon One Eye's sapphire will have a light played with it and a trick to make him look more menacing, and I think his death is going to be ultimately satisfactory when he is killed by his uncle Daemon, who eventually becomes Rhaenyra's husband. And in that process, this is supposedly when Daemon dies. That won't be till much later in the series, and the only reason why I want to discuss this scene in this video, or why I even gave this information any sort of accreditation, is because they could skew the timeline a bit and have this event happen in the first season, and if they were to maybe have the two writers lose dragons, it could save money with the budget, for one, like as not having so many dragons alive on screen, in saving one of the bigger dragon battles that could actually happen during the first season, since this dragon battle, according to the books, isn't really much of a thing, and Vhagar and Aemon take out Prince Lucerys and his dragon Arax relatively quickly. They could sort of cancel out that dragon battle by maybe having the two dragons, one of them get gravely wounded and another one just sort of not be able to fly until it later heals, and then have the two of them have a confrontation and have a battle that would save money with the budget, make Lucerys' death mean a lot more after he could have a heavy amount of screen time in the first 8 or 9 episodes, and that could ultimately happen in, like I just mentioned, the 9th episode, which would be a good way to sort of cap off the first season. Everyone always expects the biggest things to happen in the 10th episode, and Game of Thrones famously subverts that and would make some of the major events of the season happen in the 7th, 8th, and 9th episode. So maybe this show could do something like that. It's one of those things that I wouldn't personally be too pissed off with, because we know ultimately the goal will still be the same, with Lucerys dying it having maybe a bit more of an impactful moment to us watching it on screen, because if the showrunners do it right, which I'm sure they are, those being Miguel Sapochnik and Ryan Condal is a super George R. Martin fanboy, and Miguel Sapochnik is super famous for bringing us the Battle of the Bastards, but I'm sure the two of them will make this one a stretch out, but also the first season has to have some crazy event to happen. This could sort of be one of those, not necessarily throwaway, but we'll do like throwaway in quotations, where it's one of the events that they could manipulate and twerk a little bit, and hopefully the audience wouldn't get too mad, because ultimately this is an adaptation, and if they were to do everything exactly how it was from the books, well then I don't know. Let me know down in the comment section what you think. OG fans know that I'm about to say that it wouldn't translate mediums. I'm just sort of blowing through the last bit of information that I have here. Get ready, because if not today, tomorrow, or sometime before the end of October, the next casting that will be announced will likely be a female lead, and it will either be Rhaenyra or Alicent. My money's more so on Alicent because we just had one of the main leads for... Well, I guess King Viserys won't necessarily be considered towards the blacks, but his daughter being next in line for the Iron Throne, and I'm sure their dynamic and their relationship is going to be a heavy focal point of the first season, because Rhaenyra is said to be basically the hand of the king without actually being the hand of the queen. She grew up as someone who took part heavily in all of her father's meanings, so she was very much groomed to be next in line for the Iron Throne, and because all of that, I believe it will seem as though King Viserys will play more of a liking towards what's eventually going to be established as the blacks. But the next casting that will be announced will likely be Alicent or Rhaenyra, or maybe even Prince Daemon, who I know will likely be one of my favorite characters throughout this entire series, all the way up until his death. Maybe we'll get them all at once. One of the things that I think is interesting is that some of the male actors for Aemon One Eye and Lucerys Valerion, and I've mentioned these in videos before, but one of the leads for Aemon is Will Poulter, and he kind of looks like Paddy Considine. Since we have someone to compare them to, we have to realize that with effects, lighting, and just in general actors looking heavier or thinner on set, the two of these actors definitely look similar enough to be, in my opinion, father and son. You let me know what you think down below in the comment section, but we got to realize that he left Lord of the Rings for some reason, and that project, at least according to my resources and my research, I haven't been able to find him in anything that would be as major as Lord of the Rings. Maybe he wanted to be taken a bit more serious, and if that's the case, not that he wouldn't have been taken serious in Lord of the Rings, but since he has had issues on social media before with people talking shit about the roles that he plays, maybe he wanted to do something like Game of Thrones, because he knew that the Lord of the Rings show would be a bit riskier, at least at first, and wanted to be a stab. I don't know what I'm getting at, but maybe he wanted to go be in Game of Thrones because we know about all the titties. Do y'all think he looks like Paddy Considine? Is it Considine or Considine? I keep saying it like those two different ways in all these videos. I'm assuming it's like John Constantine, but instead with a D, so John Considine. Paddy Considine? I'm not sure. Let me know. And the actor that I've had, at least who I've been told is on the short list to play Lucerys Valerion, is Alex Lothar. I'm not familiar with any of his work, but if any of you watching this video are, let me know down below in the comment section. And the last thing I want to mention in this video is a bit of a rant about how age sort of doesn't matter when it comes towards, and not only age, but age, race, gender, even if it's written well enough. None of that really matters, because these people, all I want out of this cast is just good actors. They did a good job with Paddy Considine. He's recently in my mind. I'm familiar with his work on The Outsider. Brilliant fucking actor. I'm familiar with his work in a lot of the British comedies that he was in. Good choice. I could see him as Viserys. I hope that theme continues with the rest of this casting, whoever they are revealed to be. But the biggest thing that I want from all that, regardless of their race, age, gender, anything, I just want them to be good at acting. That's all that should really matter. And also, you'd be surprised if you think that some of these actors don't look alike when they start to announce them in the casting, is that when people are under Hollywood film lighting and basically Instagram filters on screen, they tend to look a lot differently, and everything tends to be more convincing as long as the writing is there. And George R. Martin is going to have a heavy hand in this show, and he pretty much, no, not pretty much, he fucking created this universe. Well, alright, I want to thank you all so much for watching. If you could please slap a like on this video, as the like goal is going to be 420. Was Khalifa laugh? Get it? We joke. Also, make sure to subscribe to make sure you have your notifications turned on, so that way you'll get an alert every single time I drop a video throughout this long night. That's the third one in this video. I really do love y'all. Also, super special shout out to every single member of my Patreon family over on patreon.com/SirHuntsReviews. They are all listed right here. And if you all watching are interested in joining, check out the link down below in the description, or one of the links that's popped off during this video. I want to thank you all again so much for watching. My name is Mark, and this has been SirHuntsReviews. Happy almost Halloween, bitch.